and thanks a lot to Mick Barry for bringing this forward. At the centre of this debate is one unassailable fact, not debatable, that the minimum wage in this country is a poverty wage. A full-time worker earning the minimum wage gets only €21,000 a year. That's €5,000 a year less than the independently assessed minimum income needed for an acceptable standard of living for an individual without children. That's an unassailable fact that the government stands over to have minimum wage workers, even those without children, to be living in poverty. Does the government really think that it is acceptable in 21st century Ireland, a country with immense wealth, some of the most productive workers in the world, that a full-time job is not enough to lift someone out of poverty? Yesterday, the Taoiseach, actually, in response to this, he said, well, the answer to poverty and deprivation is work. But these people are working. They're not unemployed. They're working hard, they're working full-time, and they're in poverty. A worker works a full week and is not able to pay the bills. And that's why the essence of this point is that it is time to lift the minimum wage to a real living wage for all. No worker should be left in poverty, and that means fighting for a €15 an hour minimum wage. In this debate, there will be, and there are in public, lots of myths and half kind of ideas spun out there about minimum wage workers. Stories that are told to try to justify the payment of poverty wages. To listen to those who oppose increases in minimum wage, the increases in the minimum wage, you would have the impression that minimum wage workers are all young, part-time workers, earning a bit of pocket money for the weekend. That obviously wouldn't justify paying poverty wages, but it's not even true. 2/3 of those on the minimum wage are full-time workers. 90% are in permanent positions. We have the most educated minimum wage workers in Europe. These are hard-working people doing essential work and trying to make a living, and they deserve a decent raise. The German government, under pressure, just announced that they will increase their minimum wage to €12 this year. If the government won't agree with our demand for 15, well, will the Irish government at least do 12, which would be about at the real increase of inflation for those who are on low income. 1 in 4 workers in Ireland earn less than €12 an hour. That includes huge numbers of workers in childcare, in retail and hospitality. Those precisely who were clapped by the government over the course of the last 2 years. They don't want applause, they want respect, and they want a decent wage. In the US, the Fight for 15 campaign won a $15 minimum wage being phased in a number of different states. We need a similar movement here to fight for a €15 an hour minimum wage. Many TDs, when this is discussed, they balk at the idea of €15 an hour. They suggest it's a unreasonably high figure. But the reality is €15 an hour amounts to €2,500 a month or €30,000 a year for a full-time worker. Ireland is a wealthy country. There is no reason why a full-time worker should be earning less than €30,000. Look at rent. I mean, for a 1-bedroom apartment in Dublin, it's €1,500 a month. How could anyone be expected to actually live a decent life, to raise a family, on less than €2,500 a month? The Taoiseach, who presumably opposes a €15 an hour minimum wage, earns €215,000 a year, while a minimum wage worker earns 10% of that, €21,000. That is simply not right. How can it be justified to earn 10 times that of an ordinary worker? Does the Taoiseach think that that's fair? Does the government think that that's fair? Or take someone like Paul Reid, head of the HSE, earning 20 times the wage of a minimum wage cleaner, for example. We need to raise the wages for the low paid and and cut them for the tiny few at the very top. Look at rents continuing to go through the roof. The latest staff.ie rental price report. In South County Dublin, for example, the average price of a one-bed apartment rent is now €1,549. A three-bed house is €2,290. Rents are going up 5 or 10% across the country. Energy bills went up 40% or more, and yet the minimum wage went up less than 3%. That is a cut in real income for the low paid in this country. While TDs have gotten pay rise after pay rise, and one senior official recently got an €81,000 raise, low paid workers are expected to make do with less. If TDs' wages were linked to the minimum wage, we would have seen a proper increase a long time ago. This also takes place in the context of the cost of living crisis and the debate about that. We should remember that when we raised this last year, the government told us that the price hikes are transitory. We warned in October with the first Dáil motion about this crisis, and again in December, that anything less than direct state intervention, using powers already available to them, would not address the crippling rise in energy and heating costs. Then they announced a tiny subsidy of €100 for electricity consumers. The government is obviously trying desperately to distance itself from Minister Sean Fleming's comments about shopping around. But the truth is that's the government programme. Go and read the amendment that was put forward to gut our motion on the energy prices crisis. And the bottom line point is the market will provide. Again and again, in answers to PQs and in answers in the Dáil here, the government has put forward the idea that, well, you need to go and shop around. Because the reality is the government is ideologically opposed to imposing regulation on market forces or taking things out of the control of the market and into public ownership. It pretends that nothing can be done. This is a global rise in inflation. And what is hidden under that is the fact of profits. This is, to a substantial degree, a profit-driven inflation in this country. It is not a kind of automatic fact of life that big business just keeps the big profits that they're making. Year in, year out, the costs go up for them and they just pass those costs on and ordinary people's lives get harder. The question of who pays the price for inflation, that's an active political and class struggle question. And the determination of big business and of the government is that workers pay the price for inflation, both by seeing declining wages in real terms and seeing increased prices. But all the indications so far from the balance sheets coming out of big business is that they're not hurting at all. Shell and BP announced last week that they're on track to make £40 billion sterling worth of profits this year. ESB announced significant profits, an increase in profits last year. Energia, significant increase in profits. And we don't accept that. And we say that that can be cut into by, on the one hand, price controls, which the government has the power to do and refuses to do it, but secondly, by workers fighting for a pay increase. Across the country, workers are demanding pay rises, and they're right. If workers don't organise and speak up, they will lose out. But when they do fight back, they have power, they have extra power in the current situation of the economy, and they can win real improvements. Before Christmas, for example, Dunnes Stores workers campaigned for and won a 10% increase. That should be an inspiration to other workers to do the same, to talk to their fellow workers, to link in with their union, to push for a meeting of all staff to discuss a pay claim and to lodge a pay claim. The same goes for public sector workers. They should be organising now to demand an emergency pay increase to go beyond the rate of inflation. And for us, raising the minimum wage is a part of this. It not only helps the very low paid out of poverty, but by raising the wage floor, it helps to raise the wages of all workers. It also helps to strengthen the negotiating power of other workers who are already above the rate of the minimum wage. The final point I'll make is that we also need to end age discrimination when it comes to the minimum wage in this country. It is blatant discrimination that people under the age of 20 will be entitled to earn less than the minimum wage. They're doing the same work and they should be paid the same for it. Thank you.